incredibly proud of myself. And that's because I became a vegetarian at 12, because I didn't believe in the way some animals were brought up, didn't know which ones, and I thought I'd go the whole way until I was older. And then I just said it was personal. And it was personal for the next 44 years. And I was talking to a pension guy, a friend of mine from General Motors yesterday, and he was talking about the difference between a bystander and an upstander. And the difference is, well, it's obvious what the difference is. A bystander was what I was, and an upstander is someone that creates some action. And I'm just continuing the story because I want to tell you my switch to why I clicked onto ESG. So I told my friend who had given me, who I shared, went to boarding school, who I shared a dormitory with at boarding school, and he got very excited as well. And then we sat down as a group and said, well, because my friend wrote in my obituary, I am the person that ends animal factory farming. And then we both roared with laughter because how do you make any difference in something like that? It's such a big topic. And we sat down a few months later around the table and at work, and he came over and there was a couple of other people. And he said ESG. And it was like a light bulb went off because I paid complete lip service to ESG for all, you've got this core integrity, you act with your own, you always act with whatever it is that you want, you're not investing in brothels or whatever it is, or that you don't feel that's right. But ESG is, PRI started in 2006, Principles for Responsible Investment, started in 2006, and in the last 10 years, 60 trillion has signed up to this hub, and it's just a hub, but it's half the world's investable capital. So, what it's doing on palm oil, or on climate, or on governance, is very powerful. It's starting to say, if we're going to back a company that's building a textile factory in Bangladesh, it's got to have foundations and it's got to have fire exits because it's good business. And so, once that clicked with ESG, that light bulb moment, the core issue was, well, how do you get factory farming onto that agenda? And that's how my journey started, and I just wanted to explain that. And this PRI hub is very powerful with from palm oil to governance like Macando to and the diesel environmental stuff, which Volkswagen, GT, and so before you laugh at me that factory farming is kind of why would you bother with that? I just wanted to mention that Schopenhauer put down 3 stages of truth: ridicule, violent opposition, and acceptance. Obviously there are no slave companies today. There are no endowments that own shares in slave companies. They're fossil fuels, which is the climate, which Peabody went into Chapter 11 a few months ago. And so assets can become stranded, whether it's slavery or fossil fuels. And I believe factory farming will become a stranded asset. And it just has to have the perception of being stranded for it to go from a P of 18 to 8. So, what this is not about vegetarianism, and that's one of the mythbusters. You can eat meat, and fish, etc. Factory farming is not about vegetarianism. So what is it about? Well, in the US, in 1992, 30% of pigs were kept in a factory farm. By 2013, it was over 97% in the US alone. 1993 worldwide, there were 13 billion chickens in the world. 2013, there were 23 billion chickens. By 2013, over 50% of the fish we eat worldwide are factory farmed fish. Factory farming has exploded on the world. It's sort of snuck up on us. So, what is wrong with factory farming? It's very efficient. Well, I think there are 4 inconvenient truths about factory farming, 3 more than Al Gore. It threatens human health, contributes to global warming, endangers food security, and consumes our planet's resources. I'm going to show that animal factory farming, although it's cheaper for consumers, it impacts all the issues that people care about. It's bad for humans, animals, the planet, and it's also bad for investors. So let's just take health, and let's take an example in health of antibiotics. I've got friends now who've died of pneumonia when they would have been treated with antibiotics 10 years ago, or MRSA, and we're starting to know people that are becoming resistant. Did you know that 80%, that's 80% of all antibiotics in the US are used on factory farms? It's 50% in Europe. We're told so often when we're giving food to our cats, etc., we are what we eat. And, but the meat lobby says that antibiotics don't transfer from animals to humans. Well, recently what's happened is a last resort antibiotic called Coller has been found in animals and humans to be resistant in China, and then in Europe, and now in the US. And of course, we all know there's increased frequency of animal death. It's the #1 user of antibiotics worldwide. And we're scared about, we're talking about people buying over the counter, etc. It's nothing to what we're feeding all these factory farmed animals. So that's inconvenient truth #1. Inconvenient truth #2 is global warming. It's a bigger contributor to global warming than the whole of the transport sector. That's kind of a bit mind-blowing. And, by the way, what this is this is a Google Earth thing, but the feedlots of the cattle, me as a youngster remember cow pats. This is called a manure lagoon. It's the piss and shit of these cows, etc. That lagoon goes right across. It's much bigger than is shown on this map. And it's 39% of all methane emissions and 65% of nitrous oxide. The reason why it's so high in methane is cattle can't digest corn properly, so they're given hormone treatment to digest it, but they still don't digest it properly. So there's a lot more methane. And, as we all know, we're at the irreversible tipping point. Food security, the third inconvenient truth. 1/3 of our grain is now fed to factory farmed animals. And it takes 6 kilos of plant protein to get 1 kilo of animal protein. And it sounds crazy, but it takes 4 kilos of wild fish to get 1 kilo of salmon. So you eat more before you die, then you weigh more, you eat more than you weigh when you die, etc. This new phenomenon can't feed the world. So let me just explain how this came about, because it's sort of a snuck up. I would understand why you don't know all this, because I didn't know all this, and it's all been new to me over the last couple of years. What happened was, in the 50s, we invented herbicides, pesticides, and chemical fertilizers, which meant that the crop yield for our cereals in the US went up dramatically. Margins came down phenomenally, so zero net losses for all farmers, if any farmers will remember that. What do they do with all this excess cereals? Well, let's feed it to other animals. So other animals are on ubiquitous pastures around the world, but let's feed them to other animals, and let's put them into cages and feedlots. And that started in the 50s. And today, so here this thing shows the planet's not getting any bigger. Arable land has increased by 8% since the 60s. The population has increased 130% since the 60s. Cereals for humans has increased 60% since the 60s. And cereals for animals since the 80s has been outcompeting humans for cereals, 230%. It's a false solution. We cannot feed the world we can't grow enough cereals to feed factory farms to feed the world. So the maths doesn't work anyway. And then the final point is on the planet's resources, as the fourth thing being nutrition, is the number one user of fresh water worldwide and the number one cause of deforestation. So it takes 1,000 litres of water to get 100 calories from a cow, as opposed to 38 litres of water and 100 calories from potatoes. And it's the cause, this is mind-blowing, it's the cause of 91% of deforestation of the Amazon. And that's because, soya has to be grown. 85% of all soya now is fed to factory farmed animals. And we're growing all this stuff. So together, these awful consequences are like four horsemen of the apocalypse. And it's about materiality, not morality. So, what can you do about it? And I just put this slide in here because you as business leaders, you as university leaders, if the wealthy and powerful aren't on the cutting edge, who will be? And we're often saying, well, it's okay for you in the West to be talking like this. But it doesn't help us, but in developing countries. But if we're not on the cutting edge of it, who will be? So as business leaders, you can influence your business practices. Now that we're seeing Virgin America and others serving cage-free eggs on their flights. Bless you. Bless you. Now, coming back to my story about how I got into ESG, so once we had that meeting and we got into ESG, I went to we had an ESG committee of 5 senior people who didn't report to anyone within an asset management company. They had just decided on their own to create this ESG committee, and there was demand from limited partners, from the pension plans, to have an ESG policy, so they had this committee, and it had no leader attached to it because I played lip service to it. So I was terrified. I went there, and I took 2 5-minute films with me, so I was literally scared. What happens if they laughed at me? I was expecting them to laugh. They were unanimous on how important it is, but they said, Jeremy, it's going to cost you. I said, why? They said, well, we can't be caught out. We give free lunches at our office. We can't serve factory farm food to our staff anymore. Or we can't, when we have events, we can't serve factory farm food. And we now have a KPI that 80%, or actually 75% of all food at events has to be plant-based. So at least it's for an events group. It gives them a KPI, a key performance indicator that they have to keep to. And actually when I speak at conferences, it's very easy just to make a demand, not to have factory farm food. It's not about not eating meat. Thank you for making the whole dinner vegetarian. But it's not about vegetarianism. It's about eating less and better meat. And as an individual, you can refine your donation policy. So for me, I have to. My mentor is the chairman of the Royal Academy. He was CEO and chairman of Standard Chartered, and I gave a donation. It was big, but actually it's 100,000. So it was big, but not devastating. And it wasn't going to change the Royal Academy, but phrase, and I suddenly came into my head, actually screw it, I've got one condition, no factory farm food in your restaurant. So I was onto a winner. I either saved the money or they changed their restaurant. and she said, I don't think we can do that. And so we wrote to the trustees, the 5 board members, which my mentor was one of them, unanimous. Why would we serve this shit? Because they're not buying it at home anymore. They're buying organic at home. I had the same discussion with the head of JP Morgan in the UK. I took him to an Arsenal Man U game. And is the World Series game? And I took him to an Arsenal Man U game. And he said to me, what am I doing financially? And I told him, and he said, okay, this has to be a JP Morgan type. We're all about well-being. We only buy organic at home. In fact, we don't even buy dog food. And then he said, so why are we serving this? I'm saying, why are you serving this to your clients? And so the movement is starting internally, just by asking the question. So it's refined donation policy. Make as an individual, make choices to buy higher welfare meat and eggs. And as an individual, sign up to this farm animal investment risk and return initiative that we've started. And as an investor, is to, these are risks hidden in plain sight, and to join FAIR. And I'll just go on to that now. I was going to do this in 2 tranches, but the world, so this is going to be the last slide of the first section, and what I'm trying to say here is that I'll come back to that at the end. So let's look at pricing investment risk for investors. The largest meat recall in US history was Hallmark Westland, and that was 65 kilos of meat, equivalent to 195 jumbo jets. It's California. It wasn't California company. Now, it cost nothing to bring this company down. An investigative reporter went in, the power of social media, paid for by Hallmark Westland, making it a film, and the result was they had to have the largest meat recall in US history that cost them $116 million. That's not what bust them, though. What bust them was a class action on health and safety. If they're treating the animals so badly, how can they have health and safety? The way we're looking at this factory farming, I'll give you an analogy on a separate issue, which is SeaWorld. SeaWorld, the way we've looked at it is, you had a film made for $110,000 called Blackfish, which many of you would have seen, or your kids would have seen, and made by trainers of the orca. That cost $1.5 billion of shareholder value destruction, because the people started boycotting SeaWorld. The CEO was terminated last September, and Jerry Brown from the government of California has enacted that no breeding of orcas anymore. And that was a Blackstone investment, which was IPO'd, and the valuation's gone from $3 billion to $1.5 billion. So these risks are hidden in plain sight, and you can see here Young Foods, which is KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, underperforming by 97% the MSCI in the last 4 years. And what we're sort of seeing happening in the world is that consumers are becoming much more aware of factory farming. We all know this, the social conscience is rising about buying organic food, etc., and eating less meat, red meat specifically. And some meat companies going antibiotic free, and policymakers are Jerry Brown again has enacted that no prophylactic use of antibiotics. If you're keeping animals so close together, you want to give them antibiotics so that they don't spread disease so fast. You give it as a prophylactic. And then businesses, sales of antibiotic-free and organic chicken have increased 25% and 33% year on year, respectively. And even Tyson's ending the use of human antibiotics on chicken by 2017. But the reason for FAIR is there's a knowledge gap for investors, and we need to bridge that knowledge gap. So, these investment risks are hidden in plain sight. Just look at the poultry and egg industry. You had an avian flu epidemic last year. I don't know if you remember it. It was February to July last year. It cost $3.3 billion, which is 6% of the $50 billion egg and poultry industry in the US. The taxpayer paid $700 million. The government, that's all of us paid to help it. And with the shortage and the price increases for eggs, groups like Compass, which serves 8 million meals a day in the US, has switched from Hellmann's to Hampton Creek's Just Mayo, which is a sort of eggless mayonnaise. And there's a whole, I talked before about the green revolution. Today there is a food technology revolution happening. Brewing egg white, perfect day is milk. Milk is 75% water, 24.x% minerals and vitamins, and lactose. And they're genetically modifying some yeast to get lactose and then brewing the milk, which is no more crazy than brewing beer or anything else that we drink. And so there's lots happening in this food technology revolution that we should be aware of. There's a lot of money to make. But FAIR is about caring about the bottom line and asking, have we priced risk? And it's a collaborative network by investors, for investors, with the objective of closing the knowledge gap. And again, it's about materiality, not morality. Since its launch in December, so it's only launched December 2015, about 10 months ago, we've got over $1 trillion of AUM have joined the network. And by joining, you can be it doesn't cost anything to join. But by joining, you can be an early adopter. So what's FAIR doing about it? FAIR has created tools. And so, for instance, I think on the table, Maria, who's on the board of IEN and has joined and was in the leadership team of PRI, has joined the FAIR initiative. And she's put on the table this factory farming, 28 ESG issues, so risk issues. And the launch of it in December, I wish I'd put up here some of the press releases. It was a fantastic launch. So there's that. There's also a benchmark which is making the food supply chain transparent, which is vital as a tool for investors to benchmark. And then some case studies, which is a practical help by investors for investors. And what we're asking you to do as well, I don't know how many of you have ESG research providers, but you're asking them about governance, you're asking them about fossil fuels and palm oil, ask them about factory farms and animal welfare. Ask them to report on it. And then in terms of active stewardship, we engaged a group called Share Action, which gives us an army to ask boards and companies what they're doing about factory farms. And so just a couple of examples of that. We had 60 investors in April 2016. We wrote a letter to 10 restaurant chains, 60 investors, 1.5 trillion, asking them what are they doing about antibiotics in their food supply chain. amazing response. From Forbes, food companies, investors demand antibiotic reduction now. Systemic antibiotic crisis troubles big investors. It's starting to have a say and starting to change the whole system. We had another initiative in September, sustainable protein. We've got a protein fetish with meat, and we're talking about sustainability and diversification away purely from meat. And we launched this initiative, 1.25 trillion of AUM signed up to it, targeting 16 international food companies. And it's since September, and it's already having an effect. And you can see the investors urge food companies to shift from meat to plant. Fortune, Walmart and others are being asked to stop selling so much meat, etc., etc. So the ask is that you join the fair. Thank you very much for your time.